Oh yeah. Mike, it's on. All right. I guess I could just talk into this and put this in front of that.
This picks up your voice from that far.
Ah, yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay.
That I was doing last week was talking into this one.
Just trying to talk into this one
Yeah.
because this one. All right. All right. Let me see. Week 5. This is Food Truck Tuesday, week 5. May 30th Alliance. All right. This is a picture of Denzel Duvant. Denzel Duvant was assaulted at the hands of the Rockford Police Department on January 5th, 2021. Denzel Duvant was assaulted while he was handcuffed by the Rockford Police Department. One of the officers involved in the assault of Denzel Duvant on January 5th was named Dominic McNeese. Officer Dominic McNeese shot an unarmed black man on October 2nd while he was running away in Rockford, Illinois. You can find more about the shooting of Tyrus Jones in this pamphlet here. We have multiples of these pamphlets up here if anybody wants one. So this is Denzel Duvant beat January 5th by the Rockford Police Department while handcuffed. One of the officers involved in the assault of Denzel Duvant on January 5th is named Dominic McNeese, and he shot an unarmed black man while he was running away on October 2nd, 2020. This is a picture of Faustin Guaytigo. Faustin Guaytigo was murdered by Winnebago County Sheriff Deputy Brulard inside of his home on April 10th, 2021. This case is currently under investigation by the Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force. As it stands, there's never been any incident of in-custody death or any incident of a police shooting that has been investigated by this task force that has ever come back to be unjustified. In Rockford, Illinois, as long as a police officer does it, it's always been justified. And so we wait for the findings into the investigation of Faustin Guaytigo to come out, but we wait for it with the understanding that 99% chance it will be justified. This is Jose Gonzalez Jr. Jose Gonzalez Jr. was shot by the Rockford Police Department 24 hours after Faustin Guaytigo was murdered by the Winnebago County Sheriff deputies. He was shot by Rockford Police Department officer Owen McGinnis. Rockford Police Department officer Owen McGinnis has also been named in a lawsuit in which he assaulted members of this community. He also partook in the police terrorism attack that took place outside of Police District 1 on May 30th of 2020. Again, the shooting of Jose Gonzalez Jr. is currently under investigation by the Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force as well. Again, Jose Gonzalez Jr. was a 19-year-old who was shot while running away. 19 years old, shot while running away by a Rockford Police Department officer, Owen McGinnis. Again, both of those shootings are being investigated by the Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force. We have pamphlets up here. Detailing the history of the Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force. Anybody that's watching from home that may come out, anybody that's out there, we have multiple pamphlets. In these pamphlets, there's documented evidence of the history of violence of the police departments that operate within the Rockford district. Here, let's go through some of the other events that have taken place here. Mark Barmore, murdered August 24th, 2009 by the Rockford Police Department. The officers who murdered Mark Barmore were found to be justified in the murder and went back to work. Michael Sago Jr. was murdered by an off-duty Winnebago County Sheriff deputy on October 1st, 2011. The officers that murdered Michael Sago Jr. Was found to be justified in his actions, and he went back to work. Philip Johnson was murdered January 28, 2012 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder of Philip Johnson was found to be justified, and the officers that murdered Philip Johnson went right back to work. Demetrius Bennett was murdered November 1st, 2012, and the officers that murdered Demetrius Bennett were found to be justified in their actions, and they went right back to work. Eddie Patterson was murdered November 5th, 2017, and the murder of Eddie Patterson was found to be justified. In the midst of Eddie Patterson being murdered, Jamie Cox also died. And any time that November 5th, 2017 passes in this city, it's only one death that is memorialized. It's only one death that is remembered. And as it stands, Eddie Patterson was shot in the back while inside of his own car. Again, shot in the back while inside of his own car. And it was said after the Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force closed this investigation that if Eddie Patterson had lived from being shot in the back in his own car, that he would have stood trial for murder. Kerry Blake was murdered December 30th, 2018 by the Rockford Police Department, and the murder of Kerry Blake was found to be justified, and the officer that murdered Kerry Blake went right back to work. Geno Washington was murdered Geno Washington died inside of the Winnebago County Jail on October 28, 2019. And after Geno Washington died inside of that jail on October 28, 2019, his family was given no answers. His family was were given no legitimate reasons and given no insight into his death. But everything around the circumstances were found to be justified, and all those correctional officers continue to work. Joseph McCormick, December 1st, 2019, was said to have committed suicide in the jail, even though his family said that they spoke to him the day before and that he was not suicidal, even though the jail is supposed to have correctional officers in each one of the pods working regularly to make sure that nobody can commit suicide or harm themselves. And nobody was found to have done any wrongdoing in the alleged suicide of Joseph McCormick, and everybody was found to be justified in their actions and went right back to work. Mikey Guzman was ran down on August 23rd, 2020 by South Beloit, by an officer in the South Beloit cruiser. Mikey Guzman was not under investigation. Mikey Guzman was not under surveillance or being chased or wanted on a warrant. The only thing that happened is that Officer Sawyer Kurth, who ran down Mikey Guzman in South Beloit, was recklessly driving, endangered the life of a pedestrian, killed a pedestrian as he was driving his police cruiser. But since he was a police officer inside of a police cruiser, the running down of Mikey Guzman in the road was found to be justified, and Sawyer Kurth went right back to work to endanger more pedestrians' lives as he drives around in his cruiser. Hold on, this is camera. Maybe I'm tripping. No, I think I'm tripping. Maybe I'm tripping. Okay. All right. Now I gotta get resituated. See? I shouldn't even move. Okay. Tyrus Jones was shot October 2nd, 2020 by Rockford Police Department officer Dominic McNeese. And the shooting of Tyrus Jones was found to be justified, and Dominic McNeese went right back to work. And then again, as we've already laid out, we'll lay it out one more time. This is Denzel Duvant, and Denzel Duvant was beat on January 5th, 2021 by Rockford Police Department. He was beat over in Fairgrounds. He was beat while he was handcuffed, beat while he was restrained by multiple police officers, to the point that he lost vision in one of his eyes and has still not recovered vision in one of his eyes from the assault that took place at the hands of the Rockford Police Department. And again, one of the officers that was involved in this assault of Denzel Duvant is listed in this pamphlet as shooting an unarmed man in the back multiple times as he was running away. All of these actions have been deemed to be justified by the Rockford Police Department. Again, this is this pamphlet that we have multiple copies of up here. This pamphlet is entitled The History of the Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force, and it lays out multiple cases in which investigations were done into police shootings and police murders and in-custody deaths. And each, no matter what the order of events is, no matter what the circumstances is, the only common denominator in each one of these things is that there is never any consequence or accountability on the part of the police department, on the part of these institutions which perpetuate this violence in communities that are predominantly black and brown. Let's see. Date of incident, August 24th, 2009. Name of victim, Mark Barmore. Officer involved, Oda Pool, Stan North. Location of event, House of Grace Daycare and Preschool Learning Center. Injuries from event, 1 murdered. Cook County Integrity Task Force findings, justified. Release date of findings, unknown. Man, I don't know if reading through these. I feel like more people gonna end up watching this through this video than in person anyway. So I'm gonna say reading, just talk about these things instead of maybe reading through them at the moment. All right, some of the incidents and some of the events laid out in this pamphlet are very difficult to read through. Again, the murder of Mark Barmore took place inside of a church that had a daycare and a preschool. There were children that were in attendance when Mark Barmore was murdered. Multiple children. Let me give you some of the accounts of the children who were there inside this church when Mark Barmore was murdered. Okay, so other than possibly the children in the basement, the only apparent civilian witness to Officer Poole's shooting of Barmore said in the written statement she gave to RPD the day of the incident that she saw Barmore come out of the boiler room with his hands up and saw one officer shoot Barmore from about 4 feet away. The witness states that she then stepped out of the doorway and heard 2 or 3 additional gunshots after that. This formal statement is consistent with the information she gave to an officer while still on the scene moments after the shooting. Later media reports quote this witness as stating that the officer shined his flashlight into the boiler room and told him to come out. He came out real slow with his hands up and his head down, and they shot him. He fell over into the sink. He tried to get back up, and they shot him again. I want people to understand a heavy-set officer was the one who was shooting him while he was on the ground. Now, this is a child who was at a daycare inside of a church, and this is what she seen happen to Mark Barmore. This is her account of what she's seen these police officers do to this man. I'm going to read through this one more time. Other than possibly the children in the basement, the only apparent civilian witness to Officer Poole's shooting of Barmore said in the written statement she gave to the Rockford Police Department the day of the incident that she saw Mark Barmore come out of the boiler room with his hands up and saw one officer shoot Barmore from 4 feet away. The witness states she then stepped out of the doorway and heard 2 or 3 additional gunshots after that. This formal statement is consistent with the information she gave to an officer while still on scene moments after the shooting. Later media reports quote this witness as stating that the officer shined his light into the boiler room and told him to come out. He came out real slow with his hands up and his head down, and they shot him. He fell over into the sink. He tried to get back up, and they shot him again. A heavy-set officer was the one who was shooting him while he was on the ground. Shooting this man while he was on the ground. This witness says that they shot him when he came out with his hands up, and then after they shot the man point blank 4 feet away with his hands up as he laid on the ground, they shot him 2 or 3 additional times. Inside of a church. At a daycare inside of a church. Let me read this. A second civilian witness, according to her written statement, stated that she did not see the shooting, but that she heard 4 gunshots and then turned to see an officer with his gun pointed in a downward position. Later media reports assert that this witness stated that officers, quote, fired as many as 8 rounds into Barmore, including at least 1 shot into his head, end quote. The forensic evidence is consistent with this witness's initial written statement, but not with later media reports. That was Mark Barmore. That murder was found to be justified. Murdered him inside of a church, in a daycare, multiple children present. All right, hold on. Date of incident, October 11th, 2012. Name of victim, Logan Bell. Officer involved, Philip Statler and Jeremiah Sizzle. Location of event, 1700 block of South Central. Injuries from event, 1 murdered. Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force findings, justified. Logan Bell, age 18, was a, quote, sweet and caring young man who suffered from a, quote, social disorder. Toxicology reports reveal he hadn't been taking medication prescribed for bipolar symptoms. His grandmother called the police, explaining that Logan had a handgun, a pellet pistol, a BB gun, and feared he was, quote, a danger to himself, end quote. Rockford Police Department Sergeant Andre Brass and 2 officers, Philip Statler and Jeremiah Sizzle, found Logan in a field near Pilgrim Baptist waving the BB gun. They ordered him to put it down. Quote, shoot me, Logan replied. Quote, you're going to have to shoot me. I'm not going to drop the gun, end quote. Again, this is a BB gun. Again, these officers know that this is a BB gun, and these officers also know that this young man is in the midst of a mental health crisis. He fired a BB at Brass, who, uninjured, tripped while retreating. Statler and Sizzle shot Logan 16 times. 10 times were through and through, explained Winnebago County Coroner Sue Fiducia. 3 of them in the head, and the fatal shots through the heart and through the lungs. Standing in the field alongside former Alderman Victory Bell, Lloyd Johnston, president of the Rockford NAACP, and Oliver Emerson, a Pilgrim Baptist deacon, the Reverend Kenneth Board said police should have done more to talk Logan down. Quote, mental illness should be handled with concern and compassion. As we see it, the only thing criminal here is the response. Okay, again, this is a 18-year-old who was in the midst of a mental health crisis, who was shot 16 times by the Rockford Police Department. This is one of 3 murders that took place in 2012 at the hands of the Rockford Police Department. Again, this is Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force. Multiple of these pamphlets up here. We'll go through this again. This is Denzel Duvant. Denzel Duvant was beat at the hands of the Rockford Police Department on January 5th, 2021. Denzel Duvant was beat while he was handcuffed at the hands of the Rockford Police Department. Beat by multiple police officers as he was handcuffed. While he was handcuffed, he would be charged with resisting arrest, which would later be dropped. Would be charged with assaulting a police officer, which would later be dropped. And the assaulting of a police officer and the resisting arrest would be the charges that they would use to justify the assault of Denzel Duvant. But once those charges were dropped, There was no repercussions for the officers who beat this man. And then this man was denied bond, and sat in jail for weeks without getting proper and adequate treatment and proper and adequate health response to the assault that took place. Again, this is Denzel Duvant, beat January 5th by the Rockford Police Department, January 5th, 2021. And the same officer who partook, one of the officers who partook in the assault of Denzel Duvant, is mentioned in this pamphlet. In October 3rd, 2020, October 2nd, 2020, shot a man while running away who was unarmed. He was found to be justified in the shooting of that man, sent back to work, and then within 2 months of being back to work, this is what he did. Beat this man while he was handcuffed. This man who has not recovered vision in one of his eyes since this assault took place. These are the things that are going on inside of Rockford. This is, somebody just messaged me and told me about being assaulted over the weekend at the hands of the Rockford Police Department. This is Jose Gonzalez Jr. Jose Gonzalez Jr. was shot on April 11th, 2021 by the Rockford Police Department, shot while running away. That's 2 people within the last 12 months, 2 people within 12 months, shot while running away by the Rockford Police Department. Not shot while holding someone hostage. Not shot while running towards an officer. Not shot while trying to steal somebody's car, as was alleged with Tyrus Jones. Only shot for running away. Shot because the officers didn't have the energy or the stamina to try to continue with the chase and chase the person down. Not that I'm condoning police chases in that way either. But again, these people were shot so that they would stop running. That's it. And again, these people were shot in areas and neighborhoods in which those bullets could have hit anybody. There's no names on bullets. This is Faustin Guaitigo. Faustin Guaitigo was murdered by Winnebago County Sheriff Deputy Brulard on April 10th, 2021 in Rockford, Illinois, in unincorporated Winnebago County, which is Rockford, Illinois. And so here we have, it was what, we on the 6th month of the year? That's 1 every 2 months. 1 every 2 months. 1 shot and survived. 1 beat and survived, and 1 shot and murdered. Yeah, let's go through these dates again. Mark Barmore, murdered August 24th, 2009 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder was found to be justified. Michael Sago Jr., murdered October 1st, 2011 by an off-duty Winnebago County Sheriff Deputy. The murder was found to be justified. Philip Johnson, murdered January 28th, 2012 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder was found to be justified. Logan Bell, murdered October 11th, 2012 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder was found to be justified. Demetrius Bennett, murdered November 1st, 2012 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder was found to be justified. Eddie Patterson, murdered November 5th, 2017 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder was found to be justified. Kerry Blake, murdered December 30th, 2018 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder was found to be justified. Geno Washington was said to have Geno Washington died within the Winnebago County Jail under mysterious circumstances. No valid and true answers were given to his family, and no one was held accountable that worked inside the jail or worked inside the facility in the institution of the jail. Everything was found to be justified. Everybody that was involved went back to work. Joseph McCormick, just over a month later, on December 1st, 2019, was said to have committed suicide in the very same jail, in the jail that strip searches you to make sure that you have nothing you can commit suicide with, in the jail that makes you change clothes and strip naked to make sure that you have nothing that you can commit suicide with, in a jail which has correctional officers in the pods, which are supposed to go around on a regular basis to ensure that nobody commits suicide. Joseph McCormick was said to have committed suicide in the jail. His family said that they did not believe him to be suicidal after having spoken to him just 24 hours prior, but everybody was ruled to have done the right thing around this. Everybody was ruled to have been doing the right thing around the apparent suicide or the alleged suicide of Joseph McCormick. It was ruled to be justified. All the correctional officers went back to work. There was no reprimand for this man dying inside the custody of the Winnebago County Jail. There was no accountability for 2 people within 2 months dying inside the custody of the Winnebago County Jail. Mikey Guzman was ran down by a South Beloit police officer on August 23rd, 2020. Mikey Guzman was not under investigation. Mikey Guzman did not have a warrant. Mikey Guzman was a pedestrian who was ran down by a police officer in South Beloit. South Beloit is under Winnebago County jurisdiction, so it was investigated by the Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force, and it was found that the police officer did nothing wrong in running this man down in the streets, killing this man in the streets. He was ruled to be justified, and he went right back to work to drive the paddy wagon or the cruiser around and endanger more lives of pedestrians in South Beloit in the Winnebago County area. And then Tyrus Jones was shot on October 2nd, 2020 by the Rockford Police Department while he was running away. Let's see. Date of incident, August 23rd, 2020. Name of victim, Mikey Guzman. Officer involved, Sawyer Kurth. Location of event, South Beloit. Injuries from event, 1 killed. Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force findings, justified. Release date of findings. A grieving mother who lost a son when he was struck and killed nearly 2 months ago by a South Beloit patrol officer squad car is now losing patience. Juanita Eslora is the mother of Michael Guzman, 35, the man who was struck in the early morning hours of August 23rd by Officer Sawyer Kurth. Eslora was joined by about 20 family members and friends Saturday in the 600 block of Black Hawk Boulevard, where they prayed and later lit candles and demanded to know why the investigation is taking so long. Quote, "He was my best friend, he was my son, he was my everything," end quote, Eslora said. Guzman's sister, Olivia Guzman, described her brother as a, quote, people person, end quote, and a father of 5 children. Quote, "He would bend over backwards for a whole lot of people," end quote, she said. Quote, "He was a good father and a good brother. We want answers, we want peace, and we want closure," end quote. South Beloit Police Chief Adam Truman also attended the gathering and expressed his condolences to the family, but he could not provide them any answers about the ongoing investigation, as it was immediately turned over to the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department. The Winnebago County Sheriff's Department, that's the same department that murdered Faustin Guaitigo. They cover for each other. That's how these things work. The Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force is made up of multiple policing entities. They all engage in police terrorism actions. They all engage in police violence. They all engage in police harassment. And so when it's time for them to investigate cases from their fellow officers, they cover for each other. The South Beloit police officers cover for the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department. Then the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department is covered for the Rockford Police Department. Then the Rockford Police Department covered for the Belvedere Police Department. The Illinois State Police cover for the Rockford and the Belvedere and the Loves Park and all the other departments. And so what you have here is you have multiple entities of police departments investigating other police departments for actions done by police departments. And that's why he can't give any answers. Conflict of interest. The definition of a conflict of interest. Police officers and investigating police officers is the definition of a conflict of interest. Quote, "We're in the same boat," end quote, Truman said. Quote, "We're waiting for the investigation to conclude," end quote. Once the investigation is complete, it will be turned over to the Winnebago County State's Attorney's Office. Meanwhile, Kurth, a member of the department since November, remains on administrative leave pending the outcome of an internal investigation, which will also be handled by the Sheriff's Department. So this man ran somebody over in the streets, killed the person that he ran over in the streets, killed the pedestrian that he ran over, and then he got paid to sit at home, paid weekly to sit at home, paid while this family was grieving their loved one that he recklessly killed. He was sitting at home getting paid. He was on vacation. That investigation is expected to determine whether the officer followed all policies and procedures before and after the incident. Since this pamphlet was put together and written, it has been found that Officer Sawyer Kurth was justified in the running over of Mikey Guzman in South Beloit. Found that he was justified. And again, this is what we are trying to point out. This is what we are trying to get people to understand. Each one of the incidents that are detailed in this pamphlet, each one of these incidents from these victims here, each one of these incidents, each one of them present a different set of circumstances. Each one of them present a different set of circumstances. But one of the common denominators in each one of them is that they could have been prevented. That is the point of raising these issues. That is the point of this, is that this violence can be permitted. And that historically, the violence that has been done at the hands of police departments has been allowed to go by unchecked in Winnebago County and in Rockford, Illinois. Since 1990, it is at least 2 on average incidents of police violence, police shootings, or in custody deaths since 1990. Over 50 of them have occurred since 1990, and not a single time have they been ruled to be unjustified. Not a single time has a police officer went to court and brought up on charges for shooting a civilian or a citizen in this community. Not a single time has a police officer been brought up on charges for assaulting members of this community and civilians in this community and leaving them like this. Again, this man who was beat like this was not beat in 2010, was not beat in 2000 or in 1990 or in 1980. This man was beat on January 5th, 2021 in Rockford, Illinois, on the west side in the middle of the night while he was handcuffed, while he was unarmed. Handcuffed and unarmed. And this man is somebody's son. This man is somebody's father. And where he recovered at from these wounds, he recovered inside of a jail cell. After being beat like this, after having his head assaulted and beat and kicked, he laid down in a jail cell to recover. Again, this is Denzel Duvant. This took place January 5th, 2021 of this year. All right, let's go through another one of these. Okay, let's. All right. Date of incident, October 1st, 2011. Name of victim, Michael Sago Jr. I want it to be noted that Michael Sago Jr. is 16 years old. Officer involved, Frank Pobjecki. Location of event, Marie's Pizza, 1513 Charles Street. Injuries from event, 2 wounded, 1 murdered. Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force findings justified. Release date of findings, October 20th, 2011. Late Saturday evening, October 1st, 2011, Frank Pobjecki, an unarmed off-duty police officer, waited for the pizza he ordered at Marie's Pizza. He was the only customer inside. He was in the break area with Vincenzo Terrara, the restaurant manager, and David Wiedner, the delivery driver. Andreas Brasino, the cook, was in the kitchen. The break area was separated by a cooler from the public entrance area depicted by the 4th video. No video captured the break area or the cooler. Terrara carried a concealed semi-automatic handgun on his hip. Pobjecki knew about it. Suddenly, 4 young men entered the front door of the pizzeria. The video shows the first of these men entering at a timestamp of 22:26. One of these men, Lamar Coates, held a revolver. He and Brandon Sago barged into the break area separated from the entrance by the cooler. Desmond Bellman skirted the counter and attacked the cash register. Michael arrived at the front door last and stood in the entrance holding the door open. He was the lookout. All 4 assailants wore sweatshirts with hoods up. Michael wore a light color while the others wore a dark color. Tarara heard the door chime when the assailants entered. He approached the front area and encountered Coates, Brandon, and Bellman. Tarara did not surrender. Instead, he yelled, "Get the hell, quote, get the hell out of here. You're not getting any of my fucking money," end quote. Pobjecki and Tarara testified that Coates pointed his gun at each of them and demanded the money. In response to Pobjecki's statement of facts, Horton denied that Coates threatened Pobjecki or Tarara, demanded money, or said anything before the struggle for Coates' weapon began. But in Horton's answer to Pobjecki's request to admit facts, Horton had already admitted Coates threatened Pobjecki or Tarara, and maybe both, with a gun. According to Horton, Tarara reached for his own weapon, reconsidered, and then slammed Coates against the cooler and struggled for Coates' revolver. For several seconds, Tarara and Coates both had their hands on Coates' gun. Tarara testified that Coates tried to shoot him. Tarara fought for his life. He testified he could see a round down the barrel and he could feel Coates trying to pull the trigger. Horton disputed below whether Coates tried to pull the trigger during the struggle, but the district court found this issue immaterial. There was ultimately no dispute that Coates approached Tarara and Pobjecki with the gun and threatened at least one of them with it, and that Tarara grabbed Coates' gun and struggled for possession of it. According to Horton, the struggle for Coates' gun only involved Coates and Tarara. Pobjecki tried to grab Tarara's gun from his hip. Brandon and Belmont joined the melee. I want it to be noted that Michael Sego Jr. is nowhere involved in this melee. Pobjecki tried to grab Tarara's gun from his hip. Brandon and Belmont joined the melee. No cameras captured the skirmish for the guns. Michael did not join the struggle. He never grabbed for a gun. We got a racist white lady that's out here. That's why we have Food Truck Tuesdays, because racist white folks come to Food Truck Tuesdays. That's why we here. I wish I could have flipped the camera around real quick. Come back over this way so I can flip the camera around. I can show everybody what you look like. Maybe they can figure out where you work at. Come back so we can flip the camera around so we can figure out where you work at. All right, let's see where we at. Okay. Michael did not join the struggle. He never grabbed for a gun. The fourth video shows Michael and Belmont turn their heads toward the struggle at 22:26. Apparently, as soon as they heard the struggle begin. Belmont left the counter at about 22:26:47 and entered the break area. But the video shows Michael remained at the front. 22:26, he left the front door and approached the area of the struggle off camera. The parties dispute what Michael did during the struggle for control of the guns. Horton claims Michael was not involved in the struggle, never grabbed for a gun, and just stood near the area with his arms down by his side, doing nothing during the struggle. Horton points to the testimony of Pobjecki that Michael's arms were down by his side. Horton insists the record shows that Michael never grabbed for a gun. There's back. All right, there we go. It's back. All right, we back. At this stage, we accept Horton's view of the facts. With the possible exception of partial fleeting shapes in the bottom left-hand corner of the fourth video, the struggle for control of the guns occurred entirely off camera. Pobjecki gained possession of Tarara's gun, and Tarara won the struggle. I'll show us looking for Shorty to walk back around here. All right. Horton claims that once Coates lost struggle for the gun, he turned, headed for the exit, and saw Pobjecki 2 feet away pointing a gun at him as Tarara held the other gun. Pobjecki then shot Coates in the back without warning, holding the gun over Tarara's right shoulder. Belmont ducked for cover behind the corner, and Brandon headed for the exit. According to appellees, Pobjecki fired the first shot at timestamp 22:26 at about 10 seconds after Michael and Belmont first turned toward the struggle when it apparently began. Horton does not dispute this account, and the video seems to support it. Pobjecki did not announce he was a police officer or order anyone to stop. Pobjecki claims he did not have enough time to say that he was a police officer or order anyone to stop, even though he was the one who shot the first shot. With Tarara's gun, Pobjecki engaged each suspect as they moved around the pizzeria. He shot Coates, Brandon, and Belmont. According to Horton, citing Coates' testimony, Pobjecki had a look of anger, not fear, on his face when he shot them. Pobjecki did not give verbal warnings or commands to the assailants before shooting them. Pobjecki shot Brandon as he headed for the door. Pobjecki and Tarara both pointed guns when Brandon exited, but only Pobjecki fired. During a break in the shooting, Belmont headed for the door. Pobjecki shot at him, but missed. Hold on. Although earlier in the incident, Pobjecki shot him in the buttocks. Pobjecki then shot Michael 3 times in the lower back. The parties dispute the circumstances immediately surrounding Pobjecki's shooting of Michael. Horton claims Pobjecki shot Michael 3 times as Michael crawled away from Pobjecki and toward the door. This the racist group. This the racist lady that just came by here a little bit ago. We want to make sure we get that on camera. Make sure we get that on camera. That's the racist. That's the little racist group. Racist ass motherfuckers. That's why we here. Racist. Comfortable in their racism. Comfortable to come to Food Truck Tuesdays with their racism. That's because the city make it comfortable for them. Racist. Racist. All right, where we at? The parties dispute the circumstances immediately surrounding Pobjecki's shooting of Michael. Horton claims Pobjecki shot Michael 3 times as Michael crawled away from Pobjecki and toward the door. Horton claims Pobjecki did not consider Michael a threat because Pobjecki turned his back on Michael before shooting him, despite being trained never to turn his back on a threat. But Pobjecki claims Michael bolted toward him from behind, coming within 1 or 2 feet of him and startling him. Pobjecki claims he shot Michael as Michael advanced toward Pobjecki. Responding to the argument that turning his back on Michael showed he did not consider Michael a threat, Pobjecki notes that this argument wrongfully assumes he knew where Michael was before shooting him and overlooks the fact that Pobjecki was outnumbered by multiple assailants who scattered to various directions. The district court generally characterized Michael as, quote, crawling while Pobjecki shot him. Again, the court described Michael as crawling while Pobjecki shot him, 16 years old, crawling away when he was shot. And racist white folks out here talking about give it up. Yeah, that's why they out here talking about give it up, because they know they live in a city in which the racist the white race soldiers which police the community can shoot people when they unarmed and nothing happened from it. That's why they saying give it up. Family member probably cops that's out here racially profiling people, racially discriminated against people, assaulting people. See where we at. And Pobjecki acknowledged during his testimony that when he shot Michael, Michael's hands and feet were on the ground. Pobjecki also testified that he did not shoot Michael to stop him from escaping. The 4th video does not definitively resolve all these issues. It shows Michael leave the screen at about 22:26:52, and then he re-enters the screen at about 22:27:05. He appears to crawl past Pobjecki and toward the door, and Pobjecki appears to turn to face Michael. Pobjecki appears to fire the first shot into Michael at about 22:27:05 after Michael had already passed Pobjecki. Pobjecki fired 3 shots into Michael, all from behind. The video seems to contradict Pobjecki's claim that, quote, This defendant was advancing towards Pobjecki when he was shot, end quote. In that quote, he was shot as he approached Pobjecki from behind and fled to the door, end quote. Rather, the video seems to show Pobjecki shot Michael the first time a split second after Michael crawled past Pobjecki and away from him and toward the door. Pobjecki then shot Michael 2 more times from behind as Michael attempted to crawl out of the pizzeria. The gunshot wound showing the 3 bullets enter Michael's back also contradict Pobjecki's claim that he shot Michael as he advanced toward Pobjecki. In the light most favorable to Horton, the video and gunshot wounds support the account that Pobjecki shot Michael from behind 3 times as Michael crawled away from Pobjecki and toward the door, and Pobjecki did not shoot Michael as he advanced towards Pobjecki. But the video also demonstrates Pobjecki was in close quarters with multiple moving, potentially armed assailants who forced him to make split-second decisions. And the video also shows that Michael approached Pobjecki's area generally from behind a split second before Pobjecki turned and shot him. According to the videos, the entire encounter lasted about 36 seconds from the moment the first assailant entered the door to the moment Pobjecki shot Michael the 3rd time as he crawled out the front door at about 22:27:03. At about 22:27:16, Pobjecki locked the front door. Michael was prostrate on the sidewalk just outside that door. Pobjecki did not exit the pizzeria until police arrived because he said he feared for his life and the lives of others. He feared for their lives even though he had just shot everybody that could have been a threat. And he had the gun. And he had no more bullets. Oh, he's saying he had no more bullets. He shot everybody. He don't got no more bullets left. He claims he did not know who had Coates' gun, and he did not know whether anyone had another gun. But Horton claims Pobjecki knew or must have known Tarara had Coates' gun because Pobjecki stood close to Tarara, who was openly holding Coates' gun during a portion of the encounter. At this stage, we accept Horton's view. Pobjecki told Tarara to call 911. Tarara tried but had trouble, so Wheatner called 911. Had trouble. The Winnebago County 911 Center received a call at 10:34 p.m. and dispatched police and paramedics. Pobjecki also placed the call on a direct line he had to a dispatcher. Brazino hit a panic button alerting authorities during the incident at 22:26:52. Paramedics arrived about 11 minutes after Pobjecki shot Michael. Pobjecki claims he did not see Michael prostrate on the sidewalk outside the pizzeria's front door until after police arrived. But Horton claims it is reasonable to infer Pobjecki knew Michael's location, and we accept that at this stage. There is no dispute Pobjecki shot Michael 3 times in the lower back. An autopsy showed the bullets traveled upward through Michael's body, fracturing ribs, damaging multiple organs, including his heart, and killing him. Horton claims Michael could have survived his wounds without treatment for 5 to 40 minutes. Horton claims Wheatner called 911 7 minutes after Pobjecki shot Michael, and paramedics arrived 4 minutes later. Maurice Pizza was very close to a hospital. Coates was the only assailant to bring a gun into the pizzeria that night. But Pobjecki did not know that and had no way to know that. Pobjecki fired the only shots in the pizzeria that night. He shot all 4 assailants and only in the back parts of their bodies. He never identified his office or gave any verbal warnings or commands before shooting. Tarara had Coates' gun during much of the incident but never fired it. All 3 surviving assailants were convicted of felony murder. Here at Racist Ass Food Truck Tuesday. I gotta use the bathroom.
All right, we're out here at Food Truck Tuesday. keep this going. We'll read from Demetrius Bennett. Demetrius Bennett, age 31, fought with his wife Amanda Armbuster shortly before 6 a.m. She visited the Winnebago County Justice Center asking for help retrieving personal items from their home at 1811 Montague. A debilitated one-story A-frame half-size window above vinyl siding. Officers James Presley, Ryan Marco, Mark Danner, and Nolan Walker accompanied her. Demetrius answered the door, then went to grab one of his two children. Police told him to put the child down. Eventually he did. Amanda took both children out of the home. The cops surrounded Demetrius in the kitchen, a very small area. For about an hour, they ordered, requested, and cajoled him to submit to arrest. He grabbed a serrated kitchen knife. They offered to let him handcuff himself, then tried to pepper spray him in the face. Demetrius shielded his eyes with a plastic bag and made a move. No reports indicate how many shots the officers fired. On the 11th of April 2013, Commander of the Winnebago and Boone County Integrity Task Force, Todd Shaver, Illinois Special Prosecutor Dave Neal, concluded that deadly force was absolutely justified. Demetrius Bennett remained defiant, Neal said. He indicated to police officers he was a man who would fight. That he was not a man who in any way would give in to the demands, lawful commands, and requests of the Rockford police officers. These officers are going back to work Sunday, and that there is no misconduct at all by these officers in what was conducted back in November. Rockford Chet Epperson added. An attorney representing the family said he doubts the official version and was shocked, surprised, and disappointed by the verdict.
Switch. Got it. Which one to do? Right of me.
All right, I'll switch.
All right. There we go. Okay, let's go through this one more run. All right. Mark Barmore, murdered August 24th, 2009 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder of Mark Barmore was found to be justified. Michael Sago Jr., murdered October 1st, 2011 by an off-duty Winnebago County Sheriff deputy. The murder was found to be justified. Philip Johnson, murdered January 28th, 2012 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder was found to be justified. Logan Bell, murdered October 11th, 2012 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder was found to be justified. Demetrius Bennett, murdered November 1st, 2012 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder was found to be justified. Eddie Patterson, murdered November 5th, 2017 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder was found to be justified. Kerry Blake, murdered December 30th, 2018 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder was found to be justified. Gino Washington died inside of the Winnebago County Jail on October 28th, 2019. His family was not given any true information. There was no accountability at the hands of the correctional officers who are supposed to patrol the pods to make sure that everybody is alive and well. All the actions that took place surrounding the death of Gino Washington were found to be justified. And then less than 2 months later, Joseph McCormick was found to was said to have committed suicide inside the Winnebago County Jail on December 1st, 2019. Said to have committed suicide inside the jail, even though you go through multiple layers of strip searches, of changing clothes, all in an effort to prevent people from being able to commit suicide inside the jail. The correctional officers are dispatched inside of the pods in which people's jail cells are in, and they're supposed to go around on a regular basis to ensure that everybody inside of the jail is alive and well. The family of Joseph McCormick said that they did not believe him to be suicidal, and they had spoken to him 24 hours earlier. But nevertheless, it was said that Joseph McCormick committed suicide inside of the Winnebago County Jail, and all the actions surrounding this appearance, the alleged suicide of this man, were ruled to be justified. Mikey Guzman was ran down in the streets by a South Beloit police cruiser on August 23rd, 2020. The officer who ran Mikey Guzman down was found to be justified in running him down, was found to have committed no wrongdoing, done nothing wrong. Then he went right back to work, right back to drive around in his car and endanger pedestrians again. And then Tyrus Jones was shot October 2nd, 2020 by the Rockford Police Department. He was shot while he was running away. He was shot while he was unarmed in the middle of a busy street in which a stray bullet could have hit multiple different people's cars. The officer who shot Tyrus Jones was said to be justified in the shooting of Tyrus Jones, went back to work, and within 3 months, that same officer participated in the assault of Denzel Duvant on January 5th, 2021 in Rockford, Illinois. Denzel Duvant was beat by multiple police officers while he was handcuffed. At the hands of the Rockford Police Department. Officer Dominic McNeese, who was involved in the shooting of Tyrus Jones, was an officer who was also involved in the assault of Denzel Duvant on January 5th, 2021. And then on April 10th, 2021, Faustin Guaitigo was murdered inside of his home by Winnebago County Sheriff deputies. Winnebago County Sheriff Deputy Brulard, this video can be found online, shot this man inside of his home. After shooting this man, and this man was laying on the ground, he was tased by the Winnebago County Sheriff deputies, and then he was handcuffed after being shot multiple times, the last one point blank while the officer stood over him. After being shot upwards or close to 8 times, he was then tased, handcuffed, and the officers told him to stop resisting as they handcuffed this man. April 10th, 2021. And then less than 24 hours later, Jose Gonzalez Jr. was shot while he was running away by the Rockford Police Department. Again, less than 24 hours later, this man was shot while running away by the Rockford Police Department. On April 11th, 2021, 19 years old, shot while running away by the Rockford Police Department. And so in 6 months, all of these two people have been shot by law enforcement in this city, and this man has been beat while handcuffed by law enforcement in this city. And not a single officer has had any consequences for it. The mayor of the city has not said the name of a single one of these victims or held a press conference to address this police terrorism. Instead, he's holding press conferences for City Market. Again, we have multiple pamphlets up here. These pamphlets of the Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force. And these pamphlets lay out the history of violence of the Rockford Police Department and how that violence has gone consistently unchecked. Since 1990, there's been more than 50 incidents of in-custody deaths or police shootings in this area, and not a single officer has ever been held accountable for it. Not a single officer has ever been brought up on charges for it. More than 50 incidents. An average of at least 2 a year since 1990. At least one in custody death and at least one police shooting has happened since 1990. And in 31 years since that's happened, not a single officer has been held accountable for it. They shooting 100% from the field. Never made one mistake. They ain't never shot one person who didn't deserve to be shot. Let me read through. Let's read through some specific excerpts. We went through some of these already once, but let's read through a few of them again. The only apparent, this is from the murder of Mark Barmore. The only apparent civilian witness to Officer Poole's shooting of Barmore said in the written statement she gave to the Rockford Police Department the day of the incident that she saw Barmore come out of the boiler room with his hands up and saw one officer shoot Mark Barmore from about 4 feet away while he had his hands up. This is the Rockford Police Department. Not in Minneapolis, not in Cleveland, not in New York. The Rockford Police Department. This is inside of a church, inside of a daycare inside of that church. The witness states that she then stepped out of the doorway and heard 2 or 3 additional gunshots after that. This formal statement is consistent with the information she gave to an officer while on the scene moments after the shooting. Later media reports quote this witness as stating that, quote, the officer shined his flashlight into the boiler room and told him to come out. He came out real slow with his hands up and his head down, and they shot him. He fell over into the sink. He tried to get back up, and they shot him again. A heavy-set officer was the one who was shooting him while he was on the ground. That's the Rockford Police Department. That's the work of the Rockford Police Department. Same police department that did this. Same police department that did this. That's their work. Shot this man in a daycare in a church with his hands up. And then after shooting him with his hands up, when he tried to get up, they shot him again. Point blank. A second civilian witness, according to her written statement, stated that she did not see the shooting, but that she heard 4 gunshots and then turned to see an officer with his gun pointed in a downward position. Later media reports assert that this witness stated that the officers, quote, fired as many as 8 rounds into Mark Barmore, including at least 1 shot into his head, end quote. The forensic evidence is consistent with this witness's initial written statement. Rockford Police Department. Rockford Police Department. Date of incident, January 28, 2012. Name of victim, Philip Johnson. Officer involved, Amado Soria. Location of event, Longwood Avenue. Injuries from event, 1 murdered. Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force findings, justified. Release date of findings, June 22, 2012. The fatal shooting of Philip K. Johnson Jr. in January by a Rockford police officer was deemed justified by the Winnebago County State's Attorney's Office. State's Attorney Joe Briscato announced that today his office concurred with the grand jury's ruling from a day earlier that the use of deadly force by Officer Amado Soria was justified. The Winnebago County Integrity Task Force, led by Illinois State Police Officer Lieutenant Kurt Cavanaugh, completed its investigation into the shooting in late March. Wednesday, Briscato and Deputy State's Attorney Marilyn Height Ross presented the evidence from the task force investigation to the grand jury. Briscato said at today's news conference that the officers, quote, acted pursuant to their training, end quote. Rockford Police Chief Chet Epperson added, quote, we are happy with the outcome of the task force, end quote. Briscato gave a detailed narrative of the events leading up to the shooting of the 29-year-old man in the early morning hours of Saturday, January 28, in the 300 block of Longwood Street. The events unfolded with 911 calls regarding a large fight and a shot fired at the San Jose Dance Club on East State Street. While en route to the scene, Police were told a Pontiac G6 driven by a woman and occupied by a male passenger armed with a gun fled the scene. Rockford police officer John Johnson, 43, stopped the vehicle about 1:30 a.m. in a business parking lot in the 300 block of Longwood Street. With his gun drawn, he immediately ordered the driver, Chiquita Trotter, and front seat passenger Roy Gatlin to show their hands. They complied by sticking their hands out the vehicle's window. A third person spotted by the officer in the back seat did not comply. That person was later identified as Philip K. Johnson Jr. Briscato said Philip Johnson leaned into the front seat area, put one hand on Trotter's leg and his other on the gear shift, put the vehicle in reverse, and rammed Officer Johnson's vehicle. At this point, the driver, Trotter, tried but was unable to quickly unfasten her seatbelt and get out. Officer Johnson holstered his weapon, went to the driver's side front door, and was partially inside the vehicle trying to help the woman. Officer Soria, 45, an 18-year veteran of the department, arrived on the scene, exited his vehicle with his gun drawn but carried at his side, and he too ordered Philip Johnson to show his hands, only to witness the man put the car in reverse and ram the officer squad car again. Briscato said Soria then saw Philip Johnson reach into the back seat. Fearing for the safety of Officer Johnson, Trotter, her front seat passenger, and other officers on the scene, Soria fired 2 times through the front windshield. Now again, he's saying that he shot this gun because he was in fear of safety of the driver and the passenger in the car, but he shot the gun right with the passenger in the car and the driver still in the car. So he was willing to put, no guns have been brought out in this situation. The car had been rammed. Nobody was in either of the cars that had been hit. But the police officers, again, have escalated this situation by pulling out a gun. And one of the justifications they're using for pulling out the gun is keeping people who are in the car, which they are shooting at, safe. All right, let's continue. Fearing for the safety of Officer Johnson, Trotter, her front seat passenger, and other officers on the scene, Soria fired 2 times through the front windshield, striking Philip Johnson twice in the chest. Trotter and Gatlin were unharmed and not charged. Philip Johnson died at the scene. Briscato estimated 6 minutes passed between the time the vehicle was pulled over and the shooting. In 6 minutes. 6 minutes. Deputy State's Attorney Ross said police recovered from the rear floorboard a loaded .40 caliber Springfield handgun, which contained Philip Johnson's DNA or skin cells. Again, this was a gun that was not pulled out on the scene. It was not wielded. This is a gun that they found when searching the car. Officers also recovered from the vehicle a prescription bottle containing cocaine. Again, this car was not stopped because it was under investigation for having cocaine in it. But these things are put into, this is a news story. These are the things that are said by the state's attorneys. These things are put into here to criminalize and dehumanize the victim after they've been murdered by the police department, to try to assassinate the character of the person who has been lynched by the police department. Briscato said Philip Johnson's DNA was also on the bottle. Winnebago County State's Attorney, State's Coroner, Sue Fiducia said no cocaine was found in Philip Johnson's system, but said he was legally intoxicated. So he was legally drunk. Briscato also said Philip Johnson was a member of the Waco Street Gang, and the gun had been reported to the Rockford Police Department in 2011. Again, this is a news story, and these are all the tactics and the things that they use to try to dehumanize and to try to stigmatize the people that they have murdered. These are the things that they do to try to dehumanize the people that they have murdered. The investigation also showed the officers' accounts of the events matched those of the witnesses. The task force, formed in 2009 in the wake of the officer-involved shooting of Mark Anthony Barmore, was created to provide an independent investigation into police officer shootings by removing the involved departments from the investigation. Police officers from Winnebago County departments have used deadly force 31 times since September 1992. This was 10 years or 2012. This was 9 years ago. 9 years ago, they had did it 31 times, according to the information from the state's attorney's office. Half of those times, the use of force killed a suspect. A grand jury has found all officers' use of force in those incidents to be justified. Let's go through this one more time. Mark Barmore, murdered August 24th, 2009 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder was found to be justified. Michael Sago Jr., murdered October 1st, 2011 by an off-duty Winnebago County Sheriff deputy. The murder was found to be justified. Philip Johnson, murdered January 28th, 2012 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder was found to be justified. Logan Bell, murdered October 11th, 2012 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder was found to be justified. Demetrius Bennett, murdered November 1st, 2012 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder was found to be justified. Eddie Patterson, murdered November 5th, 2017 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder was found to be justified. Kerry Blake, murdered December 30th, 2018 by the Rockford Police Department. The murder was found to be justified. Gino Washington died inside the Winnebago County Jail on October 28th, 2019 under mysterious circumstances. No true answers were given to his family. Nobody was held accountable. It was found to be justified, and all those COs went right back to work. Joseph McCormick, less than 2 months later, was said to have committed suicide in that same Winnebago County Jail, even though you are strip searched and forced to change clothes before you put into a pod, even though multiple correctional officers are in pods and are supposed to go around and check to make sure that everybody inside the pods is still alive and have not committed suicide, even though they're supposed to have a suicide watch in specific pods for people that they believe to be under a mental health crisis or believed to be suicidal. So despite all of those things, it is said that Joseph McCormick committed suicide inside the Winnebago County Jail, despite the fact his family spoke to him 24 hours prior and did not believe him to be suicidal. And this suicide was ruled to be justified. It was ruled no correctional officers did anything wrong. All these correctional officers went right back to work. Mikey Guzman was ran down August 23rd, 2020 by Officer Sawyer Kurth of the South Beloit Police Department. And after being ran down in the streets, he was not under surveillance, he was not wanted on a warrant, he was not a suspect. It was just a police officer recklessly driving, negligently driving, ran Mikey Guzman down. He was found to be justified in doing that, and he went right back to work. And then Tyrus Jones was shot on October 2nd, 2020 by Rockford Police Department. The shooting of Tyrus Jones was ruled to be justified. And the crooked, racist, bloodthirsty, corrupt, white supremacist police officer who shot Tyrus Jones down in the streets while he was running away and unarmed, less than 3 months on being back on the police force, he was involved in the assault of Denzel Duvant, this man who was beat while he was handcuffed by multiple police officers of the Rockford Police Department, beat while he was handcuffed on January 5th, 2021, not January 5th, 2010, or January 5th, 1990 or 1980, not in LA, not in Birmingham, not in Watts, but right here in Rockford, Illinois, beat by the racist Rockford Police Department, by the corrupt Rockford Police Department, by the Ku Klux cops of the Rockford Police Department. This man was beat while handcuffed January 5th, 2021, still hasn't recovered sight in one of his eyes. Still hasn't recovered sight. Then he was denied bond and forced to heal from these injuries done to him by racist police officers inside of the Winnebago County Jail. This is Faustin Guaitigo. Faustin Guaitigo was murdered inside of his home by Winnebago County Sheriff Deputy Joseph Brulard. Is it Joseph? Winnebago County Sheriff Deputy Joseph Brulard. This man was murdered inside of his home, shot multiple times. The last bullet that was put into him at point blank range as the officer knelt over him. After shooting him multiple times, he was then tased. And handcuffed. And after they shot him upwards of 8 times and tased him and went to handcuff him, they told him to stop trying to resist. As he bled out on the floor of his own home, as he died in his home with his children just feet away, he was told to stop resisting arrest. That's the work of the law enforcement in this city. That's the work of the law enforcement in this county. And then less than 24 hours later, less than 24 hours after Joseph Brulard murdered Faustin Guaitigo in his home, Jose Gonzalez Jr. was shot by the Rockford Police Department. 19 years old, a 19-year-old shot by the Rockford Police Department as he was running away. Shot by the Rockford Police Department as he was running away by an officer that has been named in a lawsuit for assaulting a suspect. That's the work of the Rockford Police Department. Those the heroes. That's what Back the Blue means. That's what Back in the Blue look like. This is what Back the Blue look like. This is how they back the blue in Rockford, Illinois. This is what the thin blue line looks like. This is what Back the Blue looks like in Rockford, Illinois. Assaulting people while they handcuffed. Officers getting away with attempted 21st lynchings in the streets of the city. This is what Back the Blue look like in Rockford, Illinois. Back the Blue. All right, let's see. All right. Date of incident, November 1st, 2012. Name of victim, Demetrius Bennett. Officer involved, James Presley, Ryan Marco, Mark Danner, Nolan Walker. Location of event, 1800 block of Montague Street. Injuries from event, 1 murder. Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force findings justified. Release date of findings, April 11, 2013. Where we at? Demetrius Bennett, age 31, fought with his wife, Amanda Armbruster. Shortly before 6 o'clock in the morning, she visited the Winnebago County Justice Center, asking for help retrieving personal items from their home at 1811 Montague, a debilitated 1-story, A-frame, half-size window above vinyl sliding. Officers James Presley, Ryan Marco, Mark Danner, and Nolan Walker accompanied her. Demetrius answered the door, then went to grab one of his 2 children. Police told him to put the child down. He did. Amanda took both children out of the home. The cops surrounded Demetrius in the kitchen, quote, a very small area. Again, this is inside of his own home. For about an hour, they ordered, requested, and cajoled him to submit to arrest. He grabbed a serrated kitchen knife. They offered to let him handcuff himself and then tried to pepper spray him in the face. Demetrius shielded his eyes with a plastic bag, and the police officers say he, quote, made a move. No reports indicate how many shots the officers fired, but it was 4 officers involved who did the shooting. Again, this is inside this man's own home after they pepper sprayed him, when they've been brought there to help retrieve items. No reports indicate how many shots the officers fired. On April 11, 2013, Commander of the Winnebago and Boone County Integrity Task Force, Todd Shaver, Illinois Special Prosecutor Dave Neal, concluded that deadly force was, quote, absolutely justified, end quote. Quote, Demetrius Bennett remained defiant, which being defiant when you black and you in Rockford is cause for murder, cause for a lynching. Quote, he indicated to police officers he was a man who would fight, that he was not a man who in any way would give in to the demands, lawful commands, and requests of the Rockford police officers. These officers are going back to work on Sunday, and that there is no misconduct at all by these officers in what was conducted back in November. Rockford Chet Epperson added, An attorney representing the family said he doubts the official version and was, quote, shocked, surprised, and disappointed by the verdict. Rockford Police Department. All right, let's see. Date of incident, December 30th, 2018. Date of incident, December 30th, 2018. Name of victim, Carrie Blake. Officer involved, Matt Krantz. Location of event, 1100 block of Green Street. Injuries from event, 1 murdered. Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force findings, justified. Release date of findings, July 2nd, 2019. Approximately 20% of adults in America have mental health issues. Carrie Blake was diagnosed with severe mental health issues, specifically schizophrenia. Carrie's poor mental health issues have been known and documented by Defendant Krantz on and before December 30th, 2019. On December 30th, 2018, Carrie experienced a mental health crisis. In the morning of December 30th, 2018, Defendant Rockford Police Department officers Wells, Lawler, and Benitez performed a wellness check on Carrie in response to an anonymous call stating that Carrie was moving his furniture from his residence at 1124 Green Street into the middle of Green Street. Responding officers noted Carrie's erratic behavior and refusal to discuss the matter with the police and left the scene. Later that day, Carrie's mental health crisis continued. Carrie entered a minivan parked near his home, mistaking it for his daughter's minivan of light color and model. He began driving the mistaken minivan around the block. Upon realizing there were passengers in the minivan, he stopped and let the passengers out of the vehicle. He immediately drove the minivan to his home, 1 block from where he initially entered the minivan, parked, and walked to his home at 1124 Green Street. At the time of the occurrence, Carrie's daughter, plaintiff Tycaria Blake, owned a minivan of the same color, make, and model as the vehicle Carrie drove to his home on December 30th, 2018. At approximately 1:30 p.m., in response to Carrie's schizophrenic episode, Defendant Rockford Police Department officers Lawler and Wells returned to Carrie's home. Officer Lawler took statements from the owner of the minivan that Carrie mistakenly took, as well as the passengers. Officer Lawler observed Carrie inside his home, again documented Carrie's diminished mental capacity, specifically referencing the incident from earlier in the day. Several officers on scene knew of Carrie Blake's severe mental illness and informed other officers on scene of Carrie's severe mental illness. Prior to the defendant officers breaching Carey's home, defendant Rockford police officers Police Department officers documented Carey's mental illness and erratic behavior in police reports on at least 18 different occasions over the course of several years. Because officers on scene were aware of Carey's severe mental illness and erratic behavior from their previous encounters with him, they sought Carey's family and helped to deal with Carey. Carey's family, including plaintiff Tykeria Blake, arrived at Carey's home. Carey's family spoke to Carey and tried to convince Carey to come out of the house for approximately 10 minutes. Carey's mental illness and confusion prevailed over his family's attempts to talk to him into coming out of the house. Carey's behavior became more erratic and bizarre as his mental health episode continued. Officers on scene observed Carey hold up random items at the window, such as money. Carey never acknowledged his family's presence at the scene. After some time of attempting to communicate with Carey, his family members advised the police that his mental illness had spiraled out of control to the point where he needed time to recover. Officers on scene noted that Carey did not comprehend the seriousness of the situation and became agitated with attempts to communicate with him at the window. After family members were unable to coax Carey out of the house, defendant City of Rockford officers refused to let the family assist in de-escalating the encounter and escorted the family away from the house. As the Blake family was escorted away from the house, Carey opened the front door and threw the keys to the aforementioned minivan towards an officer on scene. In addition to giving up the keys, Carey tossed a ceremonial and decorative samurai sword underhand approximately 10 feet out of the front door. By this point, Carey was no longer in possession of any stolen property and had demonstrated an attempt to de-escalate the situation by disarming himself. Defendant City of Rockford had no intention of de-escalating the situation despite Carey's surrender of the stolen keys and ceremonial samurai sword. Instead, despite Carey's increasing mental instability, defendant City of Rockford deployed the SWAT team, K-9 police dog units, a ballistic armored tactical transport, and as if preparing for war, a 40-ton, 6-wheeled, blast-resistant former military vehicle with a machine gun turret called, quote, Mine-Resistant Ambush Protected Vehicle, or MRAP. Defendant Matthew Krantz was the individual who drove the MRAP to the scene of Carey's house. Again, this is a man going through a mental health crisis, and their response to that mental health crisis was to send out the SWAT team, was to send out K-9 police dogs in the tank with a machine gun attached to it. Defendant Matthew Krantz is on record stating publicly that the MRAP definitely has that wow factor and boasted that the MRAP can be driven, quote, right up to someone's front door, end quote. Krantz further acknowledged that the vehicle is intimidating and described the military vehicle as in, quote, insurance policy, end quote, adding, quote, hopefully this is just something we'll use in parades, end quote. While defendant City of Rockford brought military equipment to the house, several officers on scene knew of no firearms inside the residence. No officer on scene had any evidence and or reasonable belief that Carey was in possession of a firearm. Several officers on scene were equipped with non-lethal weapons to contain Carey. Defendant City of Rockford officers had tasers at the ready and began loading, quote, less lethal, end quote, shotguns with beanbag rounds to use non-lethal force to incapacitate Carey. Defendant Matthew Krantz did not equip a less lethal shotgun or non-lethal weapon. To the contrary, he armed himself with his personally owned Glock 23 firearm. The personally owned Glock 23 was the firearm with which defendant Matthew Krantz would ultimately shoot Kerry 4 times, killing him. After bringing military-style equipment to the residential neighborhood to surround the house of a mentally ill man with no firearms, defendant City of Rockford, through the conduct of his police officers, again escalated the situation. Defendant City of Rockford began launching rounds of capsium canisters, Aloricin capsium canisters, commonly known as pepper spray, into the house. The rounds are designed to cause eye irritation, coughing, and sneezing. These officers ultimately launched at least 12 rounds of pepper spray into Kerry's home. Kerry appeared unresponsive to the chemicals launched into his home, and officers observed him pacing around the house without a firearm. Again, this is a man going through a mental health crisis, a man which the Rockford Police Department has documented as having mental health issues. And in the midst of this mental health crisis, they sent the SWAT team to a man barricaded inside his own home. They sent K9 police dogs to a man barricaded inside of his own home. They've sent a tank to a man barricaded inside of his own home having a mental health crisis. And now they've shot pepper spray bullets into the house of a man having a mental health crisis. Rockford Police Department. Same police department beat this man while he was handcuffed. Same police department beat this man while he was handcuffed. This is what Back the Blue looked like. This is how they back the blue in Rockford, Illinois. This is what the thin blue line looked like in Rockford, Illinois. It looked like beating people in the middle of the night on the west side while they handcuffed. Defendant Matthew Krantz did not equip a less lethal shotgun or non-lethal weapon. To the contrary, he armed himself with his personally owned Glock 23 firearm. The personally owned Glock 23 was the firearm with which defendant Matthew Krantz would ultimately shoot Kerry 4 times, killing him. After bringing military-style equipment, I'm gonna redo it again. After bringing military-style equipment to the residential neighborhood to surround the house of a mentally ill man with no firearms, defendant City of Rockford, through the conduct of his police officers, again escalated the situation. Defendant City of Rockford began launching rounds of Aloricin capsium canisters, commonly known as pepper spray,